Welcome to the J.D. Levy & Associates Calibration Point Podcast. Our podcasts are designed to bring a conversational exploration of key topics that we believe will provide value and insight to those serving in the nonprofit sector. We will highlight new developments in the field, latest research, and things we're learning from our own clients that we can share. If there are topics that you would like to see explored, please send them to us through our website at jdlevyassociates.com.
Welcome, everybody, for joining the Calibration Point Podcast this month. I want to thank you for being with us and extend a welcome to our guest, Jon Tyler. And Jon is the General Legal Counsel for the Kauffman Foundation and also is a lecturer at Columbia, where he teaches in their graduate nonprofit management programs. And super excited having you with us, Jon. You and I have gotten a chance to work together and just learned so much being with you, and was just excited to be able to have you come on and share and just talk about board governance. And with your experience being a board member, as legal counsel, analyzing the legal side of governance, guiding the foundation that you're with. You do so many things in this space. What I was hoping is we could just come together and just kind of riff on, what are those couple things that you've seen in your expertise that, wow, if board members better understood this, the world of nonprofit governance would be tremendously impacted. So let's just share with that anything you want to tell us of what sticks out to you just when you think about board governance.
Well, Jamie, first, thanks for the opportunity to be here and to have this conversation. I've very much enjoyed, the work we've been able to do together and the conversations we've had. So the chance to extend this, to the folks listening to the podcast is something I appreciate.
Great.
So, a couple of things that come to mind, and I suppose I should preface this by saying these observations aren't Kauffman Foundation observations. These are observations from 20 plus years of practicing in the nonprofit space now at Kauffman, but in my prior life and in work I continue to do with boards. So, some 35 plus years of engaging with nonprofits, engaging with the board, and or engaging with nonprofit boards and being in the space. Including doing board development for organizations over that time. Yeah. So a couple of things. One is, a lot of times, people in business, professionals, they're eager to get involved with nonprofits. I think that's a really good thing. It's a great way to exercise different muscles. It's a great way to develop skills, to expand skills. And it's also a great way to connect with your passion, with passion about improving community, improving organizations. This is a commendable way of being involved. But there are a couple of things that sometimes fall out from that. One is that to make sure that as you're serving on the boards, that you are bringing the expertise that you have, bringing the experience that you've got to that service. Because as board members, we have a duty of care. And that duty of care generally means it's a duty to understand the information we've been given. And then very often it's a duty even to ask questions, so that you can confirm the understanding or you can fill in gaps in understanding. Sometimes, at board meetings, you start to ask questions. Sometimes other board members start to feel uncomfortable, or the executive director or the leadership might feel uncomfortable with the questions. Of course, how you ask the questions matters.
Right, that's right.
But when questions are approached with an eye towards, I want to expand my understanding of the issue. I want to make sure I'm clear in what I do understand, and what I'm trying to do is fill gaps. A lot of times questions, it's not a matter of challenging.
Right.
It's a matter of understanding. And sometimes it is a matter of making sure, hey, executive director, or hey, leadership and staff, I want to make sure you do understand. You're the experts. I want to make sure you do understand. And those questions come from having the expertise and the experience of what we do day to day.
Right.
Making sure that we're bringing that helps satisfy the duty of care, the legal duty of care that we have. But more importantly, and I know, I mean, it's a lawyer saying there's something more important than the fiduciary duty, but it is more important. More importantly, it's when done well, when done right, it's helping the organization operate more efficiently, helping governance function more efficiently and effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And it's helping the leadership be more effective in their service to the organization and what they do. Sometimes it can be tempting for board members to come in. They're so excited about the organization they're with and the passion and the good work that they do, in serving community and serving society. And they just want that work to continue and they want it to go well. They believe in it. They trust the people. Sometimes, things can devolve into rubber stamping.
Right.
And boards just kind of automatically falling into a rhythm of rubber stamping. And while that can, perhaps be efficient because stuff gets done more quickly, it might not be as effective. And the organization and the people in the organization could maybe be operating at an even higher level. When you are asking good questions, appropriate questions, I mean, don't belabor things and don't ask questions just for the sake of asking questions and hearing yourself talk, but ask questions that advance the topic and move the agenda forward.
So let me unpack that a little bit with you. So bring your expertise. And what I hear you saying as well, don't be afraid of good questions and don't be afraid of questions, but also know how we ask them. So from that, I'm thinking particularly about the rubber stamping. How is there a diagnostic? Is there a red flag? Let's say that I've got a board member who is not really too engaged, and then they ask questions not because they're really caring about the answers, but because they're using them to try to show that they're still somewhat engaged. So it's a feel-good mechanism instead of I actually value this mechanism. At what point, or how do we know when the rubber stamping starts to move us up against the duty of care legal envelope of liability, if that makes sense?
I think so. And one of the things I would point to there and perhaps, further, clarify, what I said before, just because a person's asking questions doesn't mean they're engaged.
Right.
And just because a person's not asking questions or offering commentary doesn't mean that they're not engaged. I think there are a lot of ways to be engaged, and many of them are in the boardroom. Some of them have to do with, well, I've asked questions before the board meeting. We've gotten board materials, reviewed them, had questions, and sometimes some of the questions actually can be tricky, and you're not necessarily trying to call somebody out or embarrass somebody, whether it's staff or fellow board members, but you want to tee up an issue, make sure it's been identified and addressed. So you do that before the meeting. I do think, and if someone, periodically is just a way to demonstrate, in their engagement, as long as it's not derailing conversation, as long as it's not, sucking the air out of the room, there are ways that maybe more experienced board members can engage with that board member in a mentoring way to demonstrate better ways of doing things, but also even mentoring beyond that particular topic as well. As far as red flags, some folks look at votes. Well, we never have a no vote. on our board. We never have a no vote. And I sometimes will hear people complain about that. That might be worth looking at, but I don't consider that a red flag in and of itself. What I would consider a red flag is, we never have a discussion. We never have a substantive discussion. Right. It's management presents, and then there's a motion to move in a second, and then there's a vote. That starts to, I don't mean to suggest that the duty of care is not being effectively fulfilled in that instance, but if that happens a lot, meeting after meeting after meeting,
then that's a good red flag.
Then it's worth
pay
looking
attention.
But sometimes, a board may say, well, no, the executive committee, we met for 3 hours on this topic and it was vetted. Well, share that with the board. And then, so it might not be things that happen at the board meeting itself,
right?
That things are vetted and understood. Maybe it's an executive committee or governance committee meeting or executive committee meeting or another committee, program committee meeting or finance committee meeting, an investment committee meeting.
Right.
And board members are entitled to rely on the expertise and the vetting and the discussion at the committee levels as well. So I think being careful not to rehash the good work of the committee, particularly a committee that has demonstrated that it's done good work, working with staff, working with leadership.
Okay, good. Yeah. So let me take that another step. So thinking about just the duty of care, loyalty, and obedience, our 3 legal duties. And I mean, you're a legal expert on governance. Like, is there, if I'm a board member, is it harder for me to uphold one over the other? I mean, is duty of loyalty and obedience more linear or more clear cut on knowing whenever I'm upholding or not upholding that compared to duty of care? Like, do you see if a board member or a board gets into trouble on violating the legal duties, is there one that is that's harder to uphold than the others if, say, I'm a not engaged board member, if that makes sense?
I think so. So let me try to answer the question this way. One of the most significantly problematic situations that an organization can face is a board member or board members who have a financial interest or an undue reputational interest in a transaction or an activity of the organization.
Okay.
This directly implicates the duty of loyalty. That doesn't mean that an organization can't enter a contract with a board member's employer or company, even as the owner of the company. But there are right ways and wrong ways to do that. And ensuring the fairness and objectivity and the value exchange, documentation, making sure that the board member's not involved in the discussions. I mean, there are ways to do it, but oftentimes, things aren't in implicating the duty of loyalty. When things are that overt, they're much easier to manage and much more clearly managed. What's harder are situations that that aren't quite as overt. Okay. So let me give an example. And in some cases, this implicates the duty of obedience, because you've got a duty to obey assets received, resources received, and the purposes and the intent of using those assets. And this can in some ways implicate the duty of care, but in some ways it originates in the duty of loyalty. The duty of loyalty is to the best interests of the organization and the organization as a whole, not particular parts, not particular components, not this program over that program, or this interest or this employee, this staff person over it. It's the best interests of the organization as a whole. Sometimes board members can feel like they're serving in a representative capacity. Sometimes they're even brought on in a way that suggests they're serving in a representative capacity.
Right.
Yeah. So, a school who makes sure, we need representation from the parents, so they bring in a parent or parents, or there's a parent organization representative in quotes on the board. Or there are any number of ways of appearing that it's representative. Now, it's one thing to say we need, as school board, we need the expertise and the experience and the insights that a current parent can bring. We need that, like we need the expertise that accounting or finance expertise, or public relations, marketing expertise. But the accountant isn't serving in a representative capacity, representing the accounting industry.
Right.
The parent in this example also isn't serving in a representative capacity. They're bringing that experience and that insight,
right,
but they're still serving in a capacity as a director. The director's duty is to the best interest of the organization as a whole, as they have insight to that, and as their informed judgment allows them to contribute what they're bringing. And sometimes that can get confusing within the boardroom. But hopefully there are people in the boardroom that can say, well, no, it's not representative. We are all charged. We are each charged with serving the best interests as a whole. Where it can get confusing is sometimes going back out into the community, into constituents or stakeholders, if you will, of the organization. And that can sometimes be challenging, especially if the board vote goes against a particular stakeholder interest, and that's the interest that I'm, the parent is ostensibly representing, but they're not. And sometimes that's where the duty of loyalty is to the organization as a legal matter, the best interest of the organization, not to some kind of constituency-based purpose. Now, I say that there are organizations that are set up to operate in a representative capacity, and there's sometimes membership organizations that have compartmentalized approaches to the board. So that's, you take that aside, and most organizations, most nonprofits aren't set up that way and with that model. So the overall duty is different, and that can be hard.
It's such a good point, and you and I have talked about this before, but an element that I never really clicked until hearing you process that is how we bring someone on. That if I bring you on with that kind of facade, and it is a facade, because even though you're being brought on because you have a special understanding of a constituency, if I bring you on thinking that you're here to advocate for them, all of a sudden I'm setting you up for failure just by very nature of putting you in that position. And then it's easy for me to abdicate, to your point, that I'm here for the best interest of the organization holistically, not for an individual or a constituency of all of our constituencies.
Yeah.
It's a great point, John. And we see this happen all the time, right? On how we think about board members, board profile, how they're onboarded from particular constituencies. And then we end up, doing a disservice to the individuals who's giving their time to come serve on the board.
Yeah, it can be a disservice, to the individual, but also then to the organization.
Right, that's right.
Yeah. And it's not that, and going back to the school example and bringing a parent, it's not that the parent, their knowledge of other parents and the parent organization, their knowledge and even getting some feedback from that group can be useful and relevant for the board as a whole to hear. But as that parent, quote, representative, so to speak, they're not representing the parents. They're bringing a parent perspective because that's important for the board to have as it's making decisions.
Yeah. So bring your expertise, understand how to process the good questions, be aware of the duty of loyalty, care, and obedience, understand your priority as a board member. It's kind of what I take from that. What is your real role and how that carries out in those legal duties. I guess one thing for you to close with perspective on, if you see, again, thinking about just the perspective of upholding good governance, over your career, all of your expertise, writing, teaching, researching, etc., being so deep in this area of governance, have you ever seen something at a governance level that you're like, wow, that just really stood out to you? Either an organization, a philosophy, a policy. Has there ever just been one of those things with all the governance analysis, especially legal side that you've done, that has just stuck out to you in your career of being, that was just it's an amazing thing that they do, or board members in an organization that have been so well equipped in this that you're like, yeah, they really hit home runs? Is there just anything that sticks out to you?
I've been privileged to be able to be a part of, in a number of ways, some incredibly well-governed, well-operated nonprofits. And I think, and this is, maybe sound like a simple thing, but I think the role of the chair in board meetings can be really, really powerful. And I don't mean that in a way of exercise of power. I mean,
I gotcha.
Influential, and coordinating with the executive director. Not necessarily that they are on the same page, but that they understand each other's page, and being on the same page is fine. Being understanding that maybe there are nuanced differences, or maybe they're just differences of opinion. But the role of the chair to engage board members, the role of the chair is not to move the agenda along and end the meeting on time. Right.
That's such a good point.
It's to facilitate the level of discussion and action that furthers the organization's effective operating at the highest level possible.
So
I've seen some really, really good chairs do that.
That's a great point. So one of the things I tell our clients a lot that I work with, and that is that one of the greatest litmus tests in board culture is the ED or CEO and board chair partnership. What I hear you saying, though, kind of takes that to another level. Like, it almost feels like that if that relationship is not only healthy, but to your point, focused on engagement of the board, as the board chair, I'm actually helping the rest of the board uphold their legal duties.
That's exactly right.
That's powerful.
That's the board chair has a I think a unique opportunity to facilitate the type of engagement, and it may be as simple as say, John, I see you grimace with that comment, or I see you smiling huge.
Right.
Want to share? What are you thinking in response to these comments? And or Jamie, we haven't heard from you yet this meeting. Do you have some thoughts on this discussion or this motion, or whatever it might be, and not in a way that calls people out, not in a way that cold calls people like I was in law school and was terrified a professor's going to call on me. That doesn't help.
Yeah,
but that's not what's happening. And even going back to earlier parts of the conversation, I mean, the board chair, reminding people if they start to get into looking at a representative capacity, thinking about, well, I've got a stakeholder constituency that I'm responsible to, as opposed to the organizations, being able to remind people and to do it, gently and not in ways that, that offend, reminding, making sure processes are followed when there's a conflict of interest. Or a potential conflict of interest, or the potential that a conflict could be perceived. Either at staff, it doesn't have to be the whole world could perceive it. Sometimes conflicts that are just perceptions. If they're not managed at the board level, the staff can lose confidence in the board. What are they doing? So the chair has mindfulness of that. I think that the CEO, executive director, president, they've got some unique opportunities to help the chair do some of those things as well.
That's great. That's such a good point. And I love, you not only being one of the country's foremost legal governance experts, but board development, and seeing the intersection of legal roles that actually help us be better board members when we understand them, and that I can take a role as a board chair that I can also help people meet the hurdles that are set out for them just to be effective, both in culture, but also legally as well.
Right.
It's such a great nexus of those two.
All of which comes together to make the organization, or help make the organization and its people function better, more effectively, and more and better service for those that and stewardship of the assets and the people that are served by the organization ultimately benefit. And that's the real test. Yeah,
that's such a great point. Excellent place to close on, Jon. So appreciate your time. I get stuff from you all the time. So appreciate it. And this has been really, really helpful. Just again, thank you for your sacrifice of time, and really appreciate you being on.
No, thank you for the opportunity, Jamie. I appreciate it. Look forward to more conversations.
Thanks for listening to the J.D. Levy & Associates Calibration Point Podcast. If you have comments or ideas for future episodes, please reach out using the contact page on our website, jdlevyassociates.com.